I'm delighted to welcome Peter Zumthor, the 2013 Royal Gold Medalist architect, to my office. The Swiss architect is going to speak to us a little bit here about his wonderful lecture that he gave at the RBA last night. Peter, you're very welcome to my office. And it was a wonderful lecture last night, and what I loved was that you had 7 observations about presence in architecture. So rather than speak about your work specifically, you kind of talked about the inspiration. So can we go through some of these 7 observations? And you started with a wonderful memory from when you were a young boy, when you were running through the forest and running through the mountains.
It was not the mountains, this came later in my life. It was the Alsatian border near Basel. I was 8, and looking back I can see there was nothing of meaning, there was nothing of preconceptions, there was no history. It was just me as a young boy enjoying life and running. It's the kind of running I can now see in my grandchildren, which is so elegant and so light. So that's how I felt. So looking back, maybe this is my first experience of presence. That's where I started my inquiry about what is presence in architecture.
Yes, and it must have been also that great freedom that you have when you're unburdened by all of the things that you've got to do for a project or with a project. Right. And you've done some absolutely wonderful, very special projects, mainly in Switzerland, but also you have a wonderful project in Norway, which was the monument to the 91 witches that were burnt at the stake. Can you tell us a little bit about that the way that construction and the simple form repeated inspired your work?
Early on in my career, or some 20 years earlier, I had to do a building at project, competition entry for Berlin on the site of the Gestapo headquarters. And there for the first time I had the feeling I should come up with an architectural form which is beyond any known type, obviously.
Yeah.
So there I tried for the first time to do a building which would have been pure construction, no meaning, just construction, creating a space. So this was sort of my experience was it created some sort of a semantic void of meaning, so that meaning leaps in right away. So all of a sudden you look at this and say, oh yeah, this is topography of terror. So this kind of method, not even consciously, I used again in Norway 20 years later, where again I had a site where these 91 women, and some men amongst them, were burned at stake right there on this site in the 17th century. So this is also in a way pure construction. But if you go deeper into it, if you go there, you'll find that there are very other things. It's not so just one level, it's many other levels. It's also, for instance, the space is soft. When you go inside, it's made from textile, a long space, and then you have 91 windows, and you have 91 biographies there next to the window, and each window is a light. So Scandinavian people, of course, understand right away what this means, the light in the window.
Yes.
So this is clear. And the whole space there, textile space, is constantly moving, so also the lights are moving. So this is the first time I was able to realize something soft and literally moving according to the wind from the outside. So.
Yeah, no, it just sits so beautifully there. And I think also the very fact that Norway promotes the countryside and makes special monuments or special places for people to go and visit rather than drawing people to the city. It's kind of the opposite to what people in London might do. When you were talking about the house project, you were saying there were to be no drawings, there were to be no plans, sections, elevations.
Oh, the house without a form.
Yeah, the house without a form. Tell us about that. It sounded fascinating.
Yeah, it's an old idea of mine that architecture is not so much about form as everybody thinks, because the way we experience architecture is how it sounds and how it smells and how it feels and how is the atmosphere. And the atmosphere being the denominator of everything, maybe, you can see atmosphere is made out of everything. It's made out also of what you have inside yourself reacting to what you see and so on. So it's materials, it's construction and so on. So when they asked me to teach a little at Harvard, then I had these 12th grade students and they said, let's do, and I gave them the assignment of the house without a form. To focus on all the things which are not form. And then like memory, like sight, like good use, like construction, like materials, combination of materials, maybe more than combination. Combination sounds too superficial. It's more like installation or vicinities of materials. And that's what they did. Then they put these things together. We worked on it in a warehouse. We had big installations. No drawings, okay?
Yeah, fantastic. To the right scale, to the
no
full scale?
Yeah, they could do whatever they want,
Yeah.
and then there it was. This was the claim. Actually, atmosphere, maybe I can say it like this, if you do all these things correctly, form leaps in.
Yes, of course, because that's what the end result is.
Okay.
But a wonderful project. I mean, what an inspiring client to have. And you do have, a wonderful set of clients. The emotional building and the emotional effect of a person going into your buildings, it kind of brings communities together. And I think one of the buildings that I particularly love is Columba in Cologne. And your specialty there of having the skeletal framework of the old church building and then bringing that into the whole new art museum. Can you tell us a little bit how you worked across that? Because that took quite a long time, that project.
Right, this was quite some work, of course, because the concept called for a new wholeness of the old and the new. So the building is quite a time machine now, because if you go, when I went there first, you could see the ruins of the Gothic church, and then there was an excavation going down after periods down to Roman times, so this is still all there. So the concept was to have the new museum growing out of the old, so it is exactly on the old foundations, on the old walls, it goes up. And it's also with the poor material they used to repair it after the war in the 50s, which is there from the rubble, old bricks. So we kept every stone, and we developed a new brick fine enough to do the knitting on with all these old ornamentations of the Gothic times, and to grow slowly up. So this was the claim, and this is what you see now. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, beautiful. And the light quality, the way the light comes through those walls, and the presence in the street, because this is more of one of your more urban projects. Yeah. I think that one of your most popular from health spa point of view is the thermal baths at Val's, and that is it's very sensuous in many levels, and people absolutely love it, no matter what their age is, as you said last night. Can you tell us a little bit about how you worked with a very grey stone material, and how you actually used that? What was your method of making that come to life?
Well, this was in the 80s when this this spa kind of thing came to me. So the first step was redefining sort of the task, because maybe you remember in the 80s you made this fun spas with these slides and all this kind of stuff. So we, maybe I was the first, and it could be, we said, let's see what this means, hot water coming out. And this research, which is more an emotional, playful research, led me to a Hungarian bath, and in Budapest, and from Budapest to the Middle East, and so on and so on. and then all of a sudden you get into these cultures, and then you find, okay, now so our religion, water and bathing and all these rituals. So this was the thing. Let's do something very elemental, and let's trust that stone and water will do the trick completely. That you actually can do with two elements, stone and water, which seem to love each other in a way.
Yes.
that you can do this and add very little. But this sounds easy retrospectively. Doing it was a little bit more work to get to this point of trust.
But it's such a peaceful setting, and you yourself work and live in a very tranquil setting. And I often wonder, if you were working in a very busy, noisy city, would you have the peace to be able to come up with these kind of results in your buildings? You know, does your actual environment immediately where you're designing affect the outcome of your projects?
No. No and yes, but not maybe in the way you say. I mean, I like London, I like the busyness of London, so I sit in a cafe, I sit somewhere, and there I have the most beautiful ideas. So, I mean, but you're right, I need a place of concentration.
Yes.
So that's where I live, is a place of concentration. But see, if you leave Heathrow Airport, where do we get in 1 hour and 15 minutes? If I leave Zurich Airport, that's where, then I'm at home.
Yeah.
So that's Switzerland. Huh?
Yeah.
These things, countryside and city, this is very close together. So I'm in a privileged point.
Yeah.
I live there in a privileged point. That the people coming from all over the world are working for me there. We are actually in the mountains, but actually we are in the middle of everything.
Yeah.
Milano is 2 hours away.
That's pretty good, and a nice spot to go to too. You know, Swiss and watches have a lot in common, of course, and the Swiss technology and precision. And I noticed that at the thermal baths in Vals, there's no clock so obviously on the wall, but I did note that in a cylinder there is a vertical, and I think that's so clever, because you don't want to be aware of time when you're trying to relax. So was it difficult for you to say no to a clock on the wall, or was that ever part of the whole question?
I'm an architect who works also on the program and the use of the buildings. So I need a client where we can sort of do the programming and reconsidering the programming all the time as we get more intelligent about what we are doing. So it's not a brief, and the brief is holy, and all the mistakes of the brief are just built and set into concrete. So that's the process. What is a bath? So we start. So this can change many times, because at those times, now everybody is doing spas in this kind of direction. I think I've been copied 1,000 times in a way, which is fine, no problem. But then this was going back, and so also this matter of time. So I started out with a manager saying, yeah, of course, people can stay in the bath for 1.5 an hour, maybe maximum 2. So after some meetings or half a year, it was clear, in this bath, you can stay as long as you want, okay? So there is no clock needed. So you can stay, because you will develop your own sense of time.
Yeah.
But this is also sort of economical reason, so I had to fight the economists on the board to say, let's do this, this will be important, this is the philosophy of this building. And then later there came, we didn't want that people, we understood that people are not carrying their watches,
Yeah.
so I had to do something. So this is now, of course, easy. Once you have the problem isolated, it's easy, isn't it? So it's not time watching you over there like God.
Yeah.
This is, you look somewhere like this kind of time.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
love
horizontal time.
I love it, because it's so subtle, and it's a face down clock on top of a cylinder. So you make the effort, if you really want to know, to make that effort to go over. Light and sound and tranquility and all of the senses, our sensory senses, are so important and come through in all of your buildings. And also the Serpentine pavilion that you had here in London a couple of years ago. Your new projects coming up are the Alain de Botton house. So how's that progressing?
well. We'll
Yeah.
start soon.
Yeah.
Construction.
And I'm sure you'd like to do more work in the UK as well. Have you got more
Yeah,
plans?
sure. Good clients, good sites, good tasks. I'm here.
And finally, my final question really is, who inspires you, or what inspires you in your work? Do you have kind of a role model yourself as a young architect that inspired you to go in a certain direction?
It was important for me, I can say this now retrospectively, that somewhere in the 80s, I could see that my first couple of buildings were sort of full of forms which came from role models, and I felt very embarrassed myself to see this in my own buildings. But I could also see that there were some parts where there were no role models present, and I had to think, this is me, this is like me, like a boy, this is exactly me. And this shock was very good for me. Since then, my buildings, I think I do what I think is good. I'm going for the best solution. It's the best I can do. So it's inspiration is everything.
And I love the way last night in your lecture here at the RBA, you mentioned that reading, whether it be poetry or plays or listening to music, really gets you in the mood. I think that is a lovely way to actually get your self-expression into your buildings, which is absolutely evident, and they are wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.